God of the universe, maker of the stars. Who am I that you would know my name?
Well, welcome back to episode number 68 of Life on Purpose. And yeah, there's a face we haven't seen in a little while. Alex Stiles, my special guest host tonight, as Ryan and Cribs, yeah, Ryan and David are just putting things of life together, and we bless them for what they're doing and for being men of priority, of putting their families first. And the other one is Daniel, who is got his hands a little bit on the full side right now. So, Alex, welcome back to the program. Good to have you here.
It is great to be back, Mike. Thank you very much.
Yeah, and so it's been a long time. So we're going to kind of go into a little bit of your life. You're married. You've got a couple of boys.
Yes. So let's see. Been married for 12 years. I've
Okay.
got two children, James and Judd, who are semi-famous. They've been more so than me, and I think more so than you, Mike. I don't know, maybe.
In some ways, they
Yeah,
are.
in some ways,
Yeah.
yes, and very proud of those boys. But yeah,
Yeah, those
yes.
those are the two that anybody that doesn't know, when the war broke out in Israel this time, they actually came to you, and the money that they had been saving for PlayStation or Xbox or whatever one of
Mm-hmm.
those things is,
Mm-hmm.
they handed it to you, or they said they wanted to give it away, and
Yes.
you at first were hesitant, weren't you?
I was very hesitant because I'm like, okay, that's nice, but I'm like, y'all do understand that like this is like an entire year's worth of their saved money saved. I'm like, are you sure? Because like, I've worked some overtime. I can give them a little bit of money, Dad.
Hmm.
I earn a lot more money than y'all. And they're
Yeah.
like, no, we want to help. I'm like, kind of one of those where, I don't know. There's times where I'm an adult, I know better, and then there's times where, praise God, you get that small moment where you're like, I need to listen and pay attention here. And I'm like, who am I to tell them no?
And now the ages, this was back in October.
It would have
What
been
were
back in
their
October.
ages
They would
then?
have been right at 11 and 9.
That's just amazing. So
Hmm.
when I was over there in February, I was able to tell this story of James and Judd all over. I mean, I was able to tell it the idea of soldiers to parents who had children who have children still in the IDF, and friends of mine, and it just was. I mean, they're not as famous as the Cowboys that were
This is
there.
true. Yeah.
Okay, but I think in many ways they take a very close second to them. So,
Yeah.
but you by profession, you live a little south of me. You're uh, part of our congregation life assembly,
Hmm.
and a very valuable part of that. I might add as I
Thank
can.
you.
But you are by profession. Uh, I called you a brain nurse, right?
Yeah, I love that. I'm going to coin this expression. I am the brain nurse.
Okay.
Now we say neuro nurse, but it's really just a fancy way of saying brain nurse. So I'm going to embrace this title from this point forward.
Okay. So
Yes,
yeah. So you may not be a brain surgeon, but you know many of them, right?
correct. I'm not the brain surgeon. I just take care of the brain surgeon's patients.
Well, and the truth is, without you, they don't know what they're doing. I know that.
We do jokingly say that. You got a problem. The typical doctor's solution is, can I get a nurse in here?
Yeah.
And I say that with love because I also could not do my job without our fellow surgeons and neurologists. But
Yeah.
yes, yeah.
That's so true. Now we've been discussing we discuss things, and you've talked to me a lot about your job, about what you do,
Hmm.
and you work down in an area in outside of Atlanta
Yes.
that's kind of a rougher area. Could we say it like that?
Oh yes. Oh yes. Quite rough. Very high drug abuse rate. Very high there. It's actually quite sad. I work in the neuro intensive care unit, and for anybody not necessarily familiar, basically you take care of strokes, bleeds in the brain tumors, um, and to some extent, accidents or injuries, any type of
Hmm.
accidents or injury that causes brain damage, whatever that process may be. And I think if I know where we're going with this, part of this process is this very sad part is that usually about half of my patients are inside my unit because I'm frequently charge nurse over the unit.
Hmm.
I'll be familiar with the whole unit, and out of a good 12 patients, an easy 6 of them will be those who have are there because of drug overdose. Um, Drug overdose leads to uppers, methamphetamine, whatever it may be. Uppers give you really high blood pressure, and the really high blood pressure ruptures blood vessels in your brain, and your life may never be the same again. Um,
So you're seeing a lot of people that are trying to escape reality.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Whether it be you deal with fentanyl and all that kind of stuff.
Oh yes.
Yeah.
Um,
Go ahead.
no, yes, absolutely. A great number of those who have ruined their lives in trying to escape from the reality. That's a very excellent way of putting it. Um, and in fact, this leads us right into this conversation that you and I have had before,
Hmm.
where they ask, why do people do drugs? And I
Yeah.
say, that's the wrong question. Like, in fact, that's kind of a stupid question. Um, People do drugs to feel better, right? Whatever the drug may be, for a few moments, everything is fine.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's not, right? But you feel better. And I've talked to those. I've talked to a lot of drug users. It'll tell me what it's like to do these things. It's the best feeling you'll ever have in your life.
Hmm.
Problem there in that, of course, is this the idea that you're taking short-term pleasure, short-term feel good, and ignoring the long-term costs, right? So the question is not why do people do drugs?
Hmm.
That's an obvious answer. The question is why would you not? And I don't mean in that condescending. I don't mean that in some condescending. Oh, let's all go out and do them. Hear me
Yeah.
out.
Yeah. Yeah.
Why would you not do them? Because that's the answer you have. That is the question that you have to answer in order to turn your life around if you're on that path, and in order to stay away from that path in your life, whatever those drugs, whatever that addiction may be. Because the reality of not choosing not to do drugs is that I choose to suffer in the short term in order to believe I have a better long term outcome. I choose not to feel good right now, right? I could take a drug, whatever, and I could feel great. But instead, I choose to suffer through whatever it is I'm going through because I believe that that suffering will, you know, will lead to a better outcome in the long term.
So instead of escaping reality, you're actually embracing reality for a greater purpose.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that is a simple thing, but it's not easy. But that's in simplicity, that's exactly what it is.
Yeah, I mean, and it would be one thing to say, well, that's just all those people on the streets in Atlanta, or down on on a couple of famous streets we have in Franklin.
Mm-hmm.
The funny thing, Kathy and I were driving back the other night, actually from your house, and we were driving down one of the streets in Franklin that's like the street you don't go down during Halloween
I
because
know the
of
street. I
you
know
know the
it.
one I'm
Mm-hmm.
talking about.
Yep.
Yeah, yeah.
Know what we're talking about.
These people that are probably on government assistance and food stamps and everything else somehow find the money to buy everything that they possibly can regarding death. One
Mm-hmm.
guy actually builds a complete cemetery of styrofoam tombstones in his yard. It's
Mm-hmm.
like crazy. And here at the end of the street, I don't know if you've been up here in a while, or you came through, there is a recruitment sign for the space program. It's like, yeah, what is that new space unit of the military? I can't remember.
Oh, I don't remember. All I know is everyone's making fun of it.
Yeah, yeah. And
I don't even remember what they're called.
I told Kathy, I said, this street, out of all the streets in Franklin, that they would put this sign up there to be part of the space program is I guess I don't know. I could make a lot more jokes out of that one. I'm going to pass on it for once.
Yeah.
But
Mm,
you know, this is not just people who are down and out, who are homeless or
mm-mm,
whatever. You see some people that are pretty much,
mm.
executives and stuff.
Yeah, so I've seen a number of people who have ruined their life. Now, not the ones that you think. Um, I've seen the ones who ruin their life by other addictions, be it chronic alcohol use, be it that functional alcoholic they call it. Um, no, this is not everybody comes in homeless people. Um, I have a fellow in my unit right now, very tragic story. Wife and two kids, who is generally trying to turn his life around, and that's the part that makes it tragic to me.
Mhm.
Um, and his past choices caught up with him in there. The damage was already done from the drugs, if you will,
Wow.
and so he'd suffered the consequences from those bad choices in the past, um, where the damage to his brain was already done.
Mm.
And that was the part that made it terribly sad, was this fellow was actually trying to turn his life around.
Wow.
And then there are a number of other people that, like, these are many of them, the homeless or whatever. Sure, a lot of them are people out there. They got day jobs, they
Mhm.
got families, and for whatever reason, they get to the point that, I just can't deal with it. I just want to feel happy for a little bit.
You come in to our congregation, and I can see it on your face sometimes. And I'll ask you, how you doing? And one of the things I respect about you is you don't lie. A
Mm.
lot of people just say I'm fine,
Hmm.
when you can see all over their face they're not.
Right.
Um, one of my favorite quotes from a movie is the definition of fine is freaked out, insecure, neurotic, and emotional. And
Hmm.
that's kind of defines most people today. But
Yes.
you come in a number of times. I know a number of times you come in and said, "Well, we lost 3 people this week, or we
Hmm.
lost 5 people this week."
Hmm.
Uh, Alex, I've been in ministry now for over 30 years. I've done a lot of funerals, but and there was I remember times that I've done like 2 funerals in a month. But how do you cope with a week in which you've seen 5 people rolled out of ICU with the sheet over their head?
Hmm. Sometimes I don't cope well. Um, Part of that will be not just the short term, but it'll take me back through the time period during COVID.
Mhm.
Now, obviously, as a nurse working the intensive care unit, my COVID experience was far different than everyone else's. So if I go talking about how absolutely horrifying and horrible COVID was, for a lot of people, it wasn't. Right.
Yeah.
I understand the statistics. I've read the statistics behind it, where most people, you caught COVID, you were going to be fine.
Mhm.
But the part to understand is that I took everybody who wasn't fine came
Mm.
to me, and that
Whoop,
was
went
rough.
kinda lost you there in my work.
Okay, I'll back
I'll
up there.
edit
My
that out.
worst time period. Yeah, I
Yeah.
saw you freeze there.
Okay.
My worst period during COVID was I lost 4 of my patients in 3 days.
Wow.
Um, so as an ICU nurse, you understand fully that you don't save everybody, right?
Yeah.
Because you have taken the sickest people. So
Mhm.
your people have the greatest chance of dying because you have chosen to take the sickest people. The horrifying part during that got to be when we were doing everything we could and still couldn't save people. There was a horrifying part where we realized that there were not enough nurses and not enough beds for everybody. So myself and most of my fellow nurses, we worked extensive amount of overtime. Most of my fellow nurses worked at least an additional shift a week, so 4 12s a week. Most
Mhm.
of us were working 5 and 6 12s a week. Um, so there was that fatigue in there as well. Um, my hospital group was among 3 hospitals. We had something like 756 people inside a year that we lost. And we were used to losing, mind you, people like, well, how many people die in a hospital? Well, the actual number before that was about one person a month dying in the hospital. I was charge nurse over our COVID dedicated unit, and our worst was 14 people in 24 hours inside that.
Wow.
So when you come down to like, how do you deal with losing so many people? Hear me out when I say actually seeing somebody die doesn't bother me that much so more, because you have to learn, you have to desensitize it.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Otherwise, you're going to lose your mind. Like you just straight up don't do the job. You cannot do the job if you fall apart every single time someone dies. So in order to be able to do the job, absolutely, I'm desensitized to it. The part you absolutely are never desensitized to is the suffering. Those are the ones that hurt the most, is when I watch someone suffer for months before they pass, and watching the family suffer through it is the part that where you'll see me come in the heaviest. This week as well. Another person who chose, in this case, I never give specific details. That's a whole HIPAA violation, but part of it is the drug of choice was alcohol. She was way too young. Way too young. And I could have coped with her death, but I was not sure at all how I was going to cope as I watched her children try and say goodbye to her. The children were 16 and 11.
Yeah.
That is something I would pray that I would never be desensitized to.
That was for me in ministry the hardest thing. I mean, I've been the pastor that was in the ICU all night. Sitting there ushering they gave me full access, so I was the one ushering the family in and out of the room. And that's the when the person is there and they're unconscious, they're hooked up to all the machines. I mean, one of the things that I always did was I cautioned people what they were talking about in the room, because I believe the person can probably still understand.
I always presume they can. I never try to say.
I always
tell people always ask me, well, can they hear me? I'm like, even when I'm like 9, I've seen the scans of the brain. I'm like, there's nothing left. I'm like, you talk to them like they can.
Yeah. Yeah.
Talk to them as if they can hear you. Say whatever you need to say.
So let's turn a corner here.
Absolutely.
How do we deal with how do we deal with the whole issue here? I mean, for a person out there that's gone through school, thinks they came from a monkey, evolution, and there's nothing on the other end. I mean, eat, drink, and be merry, because tomorrow we die.
Or tomorrow we die.
Yeah, it doesn't mean anything. But
correct.
Alex, I had a pastor's son that was the youth pastor of our congregation, our church in Tucson, that committed suicide. I mean, it seems like this should not be happening. That things like this should not be happening to those who have faith, but it does.
Yes, it does. Yes, it does. And interesting statistic on those who commit suicide. I can't remember who did the study, but they interviewed those survivors, suicide attempt survivors. 85, it was 85% of the survivors said they committed suicide because they believed that nobody cared.
They tried to, because nobody, wow.
Believed that nobody loved them, nobody cared. So part of that would tell you that to some extent, we as the church, we as the family, to some extent, we are failing if we haven't made sure these people know that we care. And also, I would say that the church as a whole is failing to teach something about God.
Okay.
If these people did not understand that God above is their Father who cares deeply what happens to them? Who mourns, who cries when they cry, who mourns when they mourn. I feel that I believe firmly that the reason that you've said it before, I'm just going to express it differently, the relationship versus religion,
Mm-hmm.
right? I feel that too many people sit in the pew but have not pursued the truth of God and come to an understanding of how much we matter to him and come to an understanding of our relationship with him. Because there's too much of the ritual that is too much of a social gathering, right? I feel there's too many Sunday services that are social gatherings versus this deep understanding that, yes, he cares about you. And yes, this person next to you in the pew cares about you. And because if you are part of a family, then you're not alone and you don't have any reason to check out because you've got something that belongs. You belong
Yeah,
to something bigger than yourself.
I think people will walk away from religion.
Mm-hmm.
They'll walk away from a lot of different things. But for the most part, a person doesn't walk away from relationship.
Exactly. They lean on relationships.
Oh yeah, yeah. In a
Um,
difficult time, you should be the relationship is something you should be pressing into.
mm-hmm. During my own very harsh time period, during
Hmm.
about the 6 months where during the worst spikes of COVID, when I watched people die every single day. Um, I think I've shared before, my breakfast was a Chick-fil-A sandwich and ibuprofen. I might not get anything else to eat the rest of the day. And my dinner was a very large glass of Jameson. All
Mm.
right. Straight up. And I would throw it back and drink it deliberately until I would pass out because otherwise I was awake until 2 or 3 o'clock seeing the faces of all those people suffering. And I had to go to sleep because so I could get up at the next morning and go back and try and do it again.
Mm.
So
Eh,
during that time period, I leaned on the relationship. I
mhm.
leaned very unfairly on my wife, leaned way heavier on my wife than what she ever should have had to support me during that time
Mm.
period. But whatever I walked away from, it wasn't the relationship with her.
Mhm.
And the moment I could get out of the trauma, and that's an entire other teaching. Like you can't
Yeah.
heal if you're continuously within the traumatic experience, right? The moment the trauma could come out, I didn't want the drugs. Call alcohol a drug, okay? Call it
Yeah.
what it is.
Whatever.
Didn't want the straight alcoholism there. I wanted the relationship back with my wife and my children. And I
Mm.
started putting myself back together so I could have that. And I wanted that better relationship with God. And I also, needed to find out who this Mr. Mike guy was that kept talking to my children. That's a story we've shared before. I had to figure that out as well.
Yeah.
A darn fellow, man, sending
Yeah.
my children home with all these questions. I think I owe
Yeah.
that guy something. I should probably do a podcast someday with him.
Yeah, that'd be a good thing. Yeah, if you could ever find the guy. So, but so it really, I remember you coming to me and say, our congregation when you started, you came to me one afternoon after Shabbat service and said, "There's a reality here, and I want to be a part of it." And
Yes.
that was a very big turning point for you in many things
Hmm.
on that day.
Hmm.
And so, I don't know who we're talking to today. We haven't done Life on Purpose for a while, so have no idea what our audience is going to be, but I don't believe in happenstance. I don't believe in coincidence. I was just on the phone with a pastor today, and we were talking about things, and he said, I told my elders today that I don't believe that meeting this guy was by chance. Um, so there may be some, and we never have gotten to what we're going to talk about. It's not unusual, but we may have somebody that's watching, just kind of like, poking around on the internet and finds us, and they're like, wait a minute, this guy with the white sheet behind him, uh, is he's talking to me.
Mm-hmm.
and maybe they're in that place of reaching out for all the wrong things, and they've you grew up in church, I grew up in church, we both kind of walked away.
Mm-hmm.
um
Walked away
how
from good
would you
people.
tell them to get back or to get to their creator if maybe they've gone to churches and they walk in the door and people greet them and they walk out the door and that's it, they get a
Mm-hmm.
card in the mail the next week or something,
Right.
but nothing else, and so they're not finding that reality, and so they're just kind of there by themselves. How would you tell them to go about finding this God that can give them something more than an escape from reality of the moment?
Part of the process in that, I would say, would be to, I'd say I would give that twofold thing. I would say if he's led you to listen to me right now, then maybe you're at the need to come to the realization that I came to, and that was that I never had a problem with God. I had a problem with a bunch of people that were hanging out with him, that claimed they were with him. And that's I'm staring at you. You said you had a problem with those who hung out with
Yeah,
him. I like that, and I'm using that.
yeah,
I had the same
claimed
problem.
claimed that they were, yes, yeah,
They claim they were with him,
yeah.
but
Not judging
understand you
them is
might
just
not.
it
Yeah,
wasn't working for me, baby.
exactly. Um, I went through a process, and you know what? I'll share this, and maybe because maybe there's someone out there going through the same thing. I ended up, I was active in my church, right? And I'm not going to name the church because it doesn't matter. I think you could insert any name on the church, and you'd end up with a similar effect. And I got to working up in the sound room way back when. This is one of the dominoes that led us to here, as our
Hmm.
one of our good our attendees of Life on Purpose talks about dominoes in the past. I
Yeah,
believe this
yeah.
is the domino God set up to lead me to this
Uh-oh.
point.
You want a soundboard? I haven't heard this story.
Yeah, I actually worked. I did a little bit on the soundboard. Primarily, I worked on the computer in the back to handle, all the bulletin board up on top.
Okay.
I ran the computer process there.
Make mental note.
Yep. Uh-oh. Here we go. Yeah. So yeah, I did that. So, but what this was, it took me behind the scenes of the church. That makes sense. It put me down
Yeah.
there, from down there in the pew, in which I'll be blunt. I saw everything that everybody wanted me to see, and then I went behind the curtain,
Hmm.
and it was not favorable.
Yeah.
It changes your view on the church if you're one of those folks that suddenly feel like you've seen the real version of your elders, the deacons, when they're out there praising God and they come up there to the back room, sound room, and they're just sharing crass, crude jokes.
Yeah.
You're like, wait a
Yeah.
minute.
Yeah.
You're not the same person.
Yeah.
Start with, I kind of had a problem with that. I was like, well, is this not real to you then?
Hmm.
Started having a problem with the people that were there. I still didn't have a problem with God. I went one step further in which we had a few different things that happened in our church. Um, we had Zarat, as you taught
Hmm.
Shabbat. We had, call it rot, call it leprosy, call it cancer, whatever you want. That's symbolic there. We had
Yeah.
problems. We had adultery committed between brothers, the pair of brothers who were deacons. Right.
Mm.
It happened right there.
Wow.
The problem I'm like, okay, that's bad, obviously. But that didn't end up even being the problem. Like, okay, people are people, right? They make mistakes. And I'm like, and it was handled in that those that were in positions of authority that made that step down from those positions of authority. But I had the real problem there. The pastor never said a word about it from the pulpit.
Wow.
And that was where I lost respect for the pastor.
Mm.
And I'll tell you something, you want to feel lost when you're trying to find God. I don't mean lost as in you've lost your salvation, but you want to feel lost as in how do I draw closer? Lose respect for your pastor. Be like, well, who am I supposed to follow then? It'll make you feel like an outsider from the church when what you really want is to draw close to God.
Yeah.
And now you really feel conflicted because you're like, am I not supposed to like think highly of the church if I think highly of God? Well, no, not necessarily, friend. And you're like, but who am I to call out these people and say they're wrong?
Yeah.
Well, maybe it's not your job. to call them out for being wrong. Honestly, it might be your job to leave.
Hmm.
I know that's a harsh statement. Stand here telling someone to get out of church. It's not necessarily what I'm trying to say. But it matters who's gathered around. I got taught, and I strongly disagree against this. They're like, it shouldn't matter who's in the pews next to you. It should matter who you're focusing on. I'm like, sorry. It really does matter who you're gathered around with to worship. Because you look left and right as to who's going to lead you. Like, it matters who are the elders in there. Like, at the very least, it matters the elders and the deacons. You know, call them deacons, call them the elders of the church, whatever you want to call
Whatever
them.
you want, yeah.
Whatever you want to call them, whatever title they hold, that matters. Whether they're walking towards him or not, whether they're real in it or not.
So it's kind of like if you're a ripe, a good apple, and you're sitting in a basket of rotten ones. It's like, well, it doesn't really matter. Yeah, it's going to matter pretty soon.
It matters. It
Yeah.
does.
And I'm not going to put down all churches and congregations and everything like that, because I know some wonderful people that are part of churches. I may disagree with a lot of doctrines, part of congregations, Messianic, Hebrew roots, whatever you want to call it. Okay. But, if you find yourself being led away from God by the people that you're hanging out with, maybe it would be a good idea to find a new crowd.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because, you wrote this verse right down in my Bible when you gave it to me. Draw nigh unto Yah, and he will draw nigh unto you.
Mm-hmm.
And that is a universal truth set down by God, that those who seek truth will find it.
Yeah.
And if you will seek him, it was a little longer road there. And I quit seeking God for a little while. I got discouraged. I had bad things happen in my life.
Yeah.
And then I started seeking him again because I needed answers for my sons, who were asking me questions about a Bible that I literally had to dust off. Literally.
Yeah.
Not exaggerating. I literally had to go find it, pulled it out, and literally wiped the dust off of it and went back through it and found answers that I couldn't remember from when I'd read it before.
So maybe the answer here, let me kind of sum this up as we come to a bit of a close, is, we need to seek God, seek our Creator. If by circumstance, if by providence, divine intervention, whatever you want to call it, he brings some people alongside of us to help us in that walk, great.
Mm-hmm.
But if he doesn't, it's the old song. Somebody quoted to me the other day. I can't remember who it was. Could have been you. I don't know. The song we used to sing, though none go with me, still I will follow.
Beautiful.
I mean, that is where we have to come to.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't matter
Yes.
if the whole world becomes a drug addict. I still want to follow him.
Yes.
And it's because of people like that we read about in scripture. Noah, I mean, when he started building the boat, he didn't have sons. It's just him and
Right.
Mrs. Noah, and she's so famous, we don't even know her name.
Right.
It's Abraham, Elijah, all of these people that we read. Ruth, okay, ladies, will throw you in there. How about Deborah? These people decided it doesn't matter what everybody else is doing. I'm going to follow him. And if in the meantime, the Almighty decides to have some people come alongside of me, great.
Mm-hmm.
But if not, it's still great.
Yes, because in this process, you've started a process right there. Who knows? This may be our next whole Life on Purpose episode. But you end up seeking. If you seek God, you will find him.
Mm-hmm.
If you seek him all on your own, you'll find him.
Mm-hmm.
I'll tell you something a little different. If you're out there seeking God and you don't even know he exists, you'll find him.
Yeah.
Anybody who's hung out with me long has heard of the Stoics, my studying of the
Yeah.
Greeks. Okay.
Yeah.
These Greek philosophers, I am inspired and shamed by them. Hear me out. Because if you're like, oh, Alex on Life on Purpose quoted the Greeks, I should model my entire life after the Greeks. No, please don't. Please don't. Okay, please don't. But there were some people among there that were seeking truth. And I'm going to make a semi controversial statement here. There are some of those people that got closer to God without knowing Him, got closer to the truths of God without knowing Him than many people that are sitting in the pews of churches today.
Oh, yeah.
Because there's a lot of people sitting in the church pews that aren't seeking the truth.
Yeah.
They're just showing up there for an hour and a half. But if you're seeking the truth, then you'll find it. And part of what you'll find, and that would be, I can't skip on this without this conversation because I should come back to this one question and answer this question of, why not drugs? I should loop back around, come around here in this full conversation. And that is to find purpose.
Yeah.
The entire title of this podcast, right? Happiness is actually kind of optional in this life. It's wonderful when you have it. And there's a deeper joy when you know you're inside God's will that defies happiness. Like,
Oh, yeah.
I am miserable right now, but I'm doing what He wants me to do.
Yeah.
And so there is that. There's also a deeper purpose, a deeper joy in having a purpose that makes suffering worth it. And I want to summarize one fellow who said some of these things better than what I did. I know we're approaching our time here, but I'm going to finish this quote and then I'm going to bring it around with, we're going to pull, this is a fellow who did not know God. This was a fellow by the name of Marcus Aurelius. He was a Roman emperor, lived after the time period of Yeshua. I'll have to pull back and quote you some exact time frames. He was living in the very, very earliest time period of the church. Okay, Roman emperor.
Fourth
And
century.
this fellow said, he said, at dawn, when you have trouble getting out of bed, tell yourself, I have to go to work as a human being. What do I have to complain of if I'm going to do what I was born for, the things I was brought into the world to do? Or is this what I was created for, to huddle under the blankets and stay warm? But it's nicer here. So you were born to feel nice instead of doing things and experience them? Don't you see the plants, the birds, the ants and the spiders and bees going about their individual tasks, putting the world in order as best they can? And you're not willing to do your job as a human being. Why aren't you running to do what your nature demands? But we have to sleep sometime. Agreed. But nature set a limit on that, as it did on eating and drinking, and you're over the limit. You've had more than enough of that, but not of working. There you're still below your quota. You don't love yourself enough, or you'd love your nature too and what it demands of you. People who love what they do wear themselves down doing it. They even forget to wash or eat. Do you have any less respect for your own nature than the engraver does for engraving, the dancer for the dance, the miser for money, or the social climber for the status? When they're really possessed by what they do, they'd rather stop eating and sleeping than give up practicing their arts.
Wow.
Is helping others less valuable to you? Not worth your effort? That was a man that never knew God, never heard the words of Yeshua, never heard the Great Commission, never read the Torah. But that man hit on a truth right there of God.
Mm.
He hit on one of God's own truths right there of rising up and doing, but insert that what our Creator created us for.
Yeah.
And if you've never pondered that, there's this thought. I have to say, I fully agree with it. And it'll blow your mind a moment if you ponder it. That God created man because he was lonely. And he wanted someone to speak to.
Yeah.
He wanted someone to talk to. Someone to live with. I read the quote by a man who never knew God. But if I know that there is a God in heaven who created me because he wanted to talk to me, I don't have to be sitting in a church to interact with this God.
Because you froze up there.
Backing up.
Yeah. Back up
If
just a little
bit. If I understood God on this manner, I could interact with him in a lot different way, right?
bit. Yeah.
don't have to be sitting in a church to interact with him. I don't have to be feeling especially holy to interact with him. There's this concept, I have to be in a good place in my mind to talk with God.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I can't be angry when I talk with God.
Hmm.
I'll tell you an odd statement. God will hear your prayers even if they start with curse words.
Hmm.
Not because you should, but because he loves you enough.
Yeah.
God can be made angry, absolutely. But you're not going to hurt God's feelings because you talked to him. Because if you're standing there yelling, like, I'm yelling at God, he's going to strike me down. No, he's not. You're pouring out your heart to him.
Yeah.
Read the Psalms sometime.
Oh, yeah.
Read a good
David did a
translation of
lot
the
of that.
Psalms. Like,
Yeah.
David yelled at God at
Yeah.
times
He did.
because he poured his heart out to him.
Hmm.
And so if I can do that with God, I would never be leaning towards this, I'm going to commit suicide because no one loves me. You got a God that created love, wanted so badly to talk to someone that he created you. You're probably out there wanting to talk to somebody else right now.
Yeah.
If you're in a place like that, you wish you had somebody to talk to.
Yeah.
Someone who understands.
Yeah.
And he does.
With that, if people need to just talk to somebody, they can email us at onpurpose@mail.com. But you bring up a couple of interesting points that I've taught through the years, that he created mankind because he was lonely. The thought that the creator of the universe needed something, and that is us. And if there's a planet full of people that are still not talking to him, he's still lonely.
Mm-hmm.
And so, if you've ever been in a crowded room and you feel like the purple cat, which I do that a lot, and someone comes over and talks to you, one person out of the whole room comes over and says, "Hey, I just want to spend a few minutes with you." That's kind of the way that you're doing with the creator now. If you say, I know there's a whole world of people out there, and I've always treated, maybe somebody's treated him with like, well, I didn't want to bother him. And he's like, nobody's bothering me. I'd appreciate somebody bothering me right now, just spending some
Right?
time with me.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Because, in the process of us bothering him with our issues that he knows all about anyway, we might find that we find that he has a purpose for us. He has a plan for us, one for good and not for evil, to give us a future and a hope. And that's what we're all about. So, Alex, man, as usual, you probably keep me up at night sometimes. Just I got to start thinking back through some stuff, and it's been a pleasure. We're going to continue. You're going to be on as guest host for a while. Who knows how long? Maybe indefinitely. As long as I'm not sure if I have the brain power for that one, but
the
we'll
cat
see.
escaped from the duct tape.
Hey, it's your cat. All right.
Mm.
We
Well,
won't
I
tell
look
anybody
forward
that
to
you
it, Mike.
duct taped the cat so that it wouldn't get up in your lap.
Yeah, he got out. He got
Oh.
out, so
Okay. All right.
Yeah, so I definitely I look forward to this, Mike. I look forward to many further conversations. And I also look forward to, interaction back from our audience. Like,
Yeah.
something in there's got to be something like, I wish Mike and any of those guys would talk about something or would address something.
Yeah.
Like, we got an email address. Send
Let
it
us
to
know.
us.
Let us know.
And we will.
All right. Hope to see you on Shabbat.
Yes, sir. I'll see you then.
All of heaven is glory. How could it be that the maker of